involve the risk of loss.
8:07 Team Hochberg Traffic Center time and Jim Telemonte.
In North Barrington, 59 is closed between 22 and Signal Hill Road due to a crash. The northbound tri-state is heavy. Delays from Southwest Highway to 47th, Ogden to 31st, and from Reagan Tollway to Lawrence, southbound it's a bit tight, Balmoral to Irving Park. Eastbound Reagan Tollway, we're seeing fairly mild delays from the Aurora Toll to Eola and Washington to Yackley. Westbound Veterans Memorial traffic gets the brakes. Fountain Toll to the Reagan Tollway. Eden's 19 minutes, Lake Hook to Montrose, but outbound 33. Kennedy, 49 minutes, O'Hare to downtown, quicker than the Express. Eisenhower, 54 minutes, 390 to Burnt Circle. Stevenson, 54 minutes, 355 to the drive. Ryan, 27 minutes from 95th. That's traffic. I am Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center and our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Mostly cloudy today, the high 33. Some snow tonight, 1 to 3 inches, low 27. Snow at times tomorrow, another 1 to 3 possible, high 31. Flurries Friday morning, otherwise a cloudy day, the high at 35. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
30 at O'Hare. Next news at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So we've got some Dem-splaining going on. Let's start with Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She splained why she tore up Trump's speech as he left the dais.
Madam Speaker, what did you think of Trump's speech tonight?
I tore it up. I was trying to find one page.
And the audio fades a little bit because she's being whisked away by people. She almost looks comatose, like, I tore it up. What was the rest of her statement?
I would try to find one page of truth on it, and I couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. Good reaction via Twitter on that topic from Washington Examiner's Siraj Hashmi. So Speaker Pelosi doesn't believe that Kaya Mueller was captive of ISIS and murdered by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Hell of a strategy here. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that is just sort of difficult to refute, including a lot of the economic data. Oh, and by the way, estimate for January jobs numbers just out. Yeah. 291,000 for January, which is almost double the street estimate. So we'll see if that holds up on Friday. But more bad news for Democrats. Good job creation numbers. That's one Dem-splainer. The other Dem-splainer is the fourth, maybe fifth place finisher in Iowa. His name's Joe Biden. He used to be somebody. And now he's on the Today Show trying to run interference for Hunter Biden. Listen to this.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position? No. Knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you.
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
Everyone.
Don't you think that it's just
Hunter
one of those
said it.
things where people think, well, that seems kind of sleazy. Why would he have that job if not for who his father was?
Because he's a very bright guy.
I guess the question I'm kind of asking is,
Appearance.
was it right?
His appearance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he said he regretted having done it. Speaks for himself. He's a grown man.
So I'm sorry. Which is it again, Joe? He got it because he's a bright guy, or he got it because his last name is Biden and you were vice president, and that's why he regrets it. Here's the thing about I know Pelosi. I know from the Beltway media, Pelosi is a brilliant strategist. Not since von Clausewitz have we been exposed to such a brilliant tactician. And Joe Biden, of course, is the champion of the working man and woman.
All right.
That's
why he did so well in Iowa.
He's also, got a 40-year record of distinguished public service. These two are defenseless. It's like a UFC fight where the guy is in the corner with his hands over his head and he's just getting pummeled right before the referee stops the
later
fight.
in that interview, he pretty much screams at Savannah, like, get your facts straight. And it got pretty ugly. So it's, I don't know, he looks like he's desperate right now. And he's got to explain why he lost all the moderates, I think, to Pete Buttigieg in Iowa. It's ridiculous. I mean, Amy Klobuchar at this point may surpass him. Because all the votes aren't in yet in Iowa.
Yeah, and
he's barely hanging on to fourth place.
And in speaking of conventional wisdom from the Beltway that oftentimes turns out to be a synonym for wrong, the firewall in South Carolina that's going to keep Joe in this race.
Yeah.
We'll see. Momentum is a funny thing, and so is the lack thereof. Rich Lowry, he's the editor of National Review. He's a Fox News contributor, and he's the author of the book, The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. Rich, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it. Do we have Rich?
Mr. Lowry, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, we got to cue you up. So this two-way communication thing mystifies us. So Rich, what about? Let's start with Nancy Pelosi, since she's the woman of the hour, and she just couldn't find any truth in Trump's State of the Union address. That's why she threw a tantrum.
Yeah, well, the whole thing about Nancy Pelosi, she's supposedly this calm, cool, calculating presence whose genius is getting under Trump's skin, and she showed her deep irritation last night. That was an incredibly petty gesture. Now, I think Trump should have shook her hand at the beginning. I like grace notes. But to stand there ripping up the speech, she should have known this moment was going to come when she started to impeach Trump in the first place, that eventually he'd be acquitted or be near acquittal, and he'd be in this majestic setting, and she'd have to sit back there like a prop and behave herself, and she couldn't handle it.
But it's almost as if they were rooting against America. I mean, when they talked about low unemployment numbers for African Americans and minorities, why not stand up and clap for that?
Because they can't abide anything this president says, even when it's things that normally everyone would welcome. And that's one thing I think is really notable about the speech. The ratio of outrage it caused among the opposition, on Twitter, on cable TV, and in the hall, and the way most people would receive it, I think is vast. Because I'm sitting there as a conservative, wants to limit government, advance the ball on those sort of things. And there's almost nothing for me. I mean, it's a very centrist speech, right? Planting trees, going to Mars, research to support extremely premature babies. And that was a really moving moment among many from the gallery. And so most people, that's not going to strike them as unreasonable. It's going to strike them as entirely reasonable or welcome. So they're going to be, why did the Speaker of the House stand up and rip up this speech?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. When Trump goes conventional, it's unconventional, and so he gets the same rise out of them that he gets when he is, more boorish in his communication style, more pugilistic in his communication style. Not that he wasn't aggressive last night, but he was aggressive on the merits, not in an ad hominem way. It gets this.
What happens? They keep him in jail until they need to be released, and then they won't hand them over to the federal authorities. So Trump's totally wrong. But obviously nothing he said is wrong. They just don't want him to talk about that. And look, I don't think Trump, he shouldn't directly mention Obama. That's sort of a norm. All presidents and State of the Unions, you don't do that. So that sort of stuff's not great. But they are driven crazy by him, and they may have been driven crazy into, we'll see, how it shakes out a little further, into a real severe political mistake in this impeachment. If you just go by the Gallup poll, and you can't take one poll, you got to average them out. But it's not just that Trump's approval rating is up to 49, the highest of his presidency. The approval rating of the Democrats has dipped notably, and the fortunes of the Republican Party has gone up. So I've always thought the best way for Democrats to combat Trump is treat him like a normal Republican. Say he's going to take you away from health care, he cut taxes for the rich, and this is terrible, and not what he'd campaigned on. Or something like that. But instead, they treat him as this incipient, fascist, and go crazy and hysterical because of it.
There's we had one listener describe Trump this way after the State of the Union address and Nancy Pelosi's little snit, and I thought this was pretty good. he's like human sodium pentothal. He brings out in people who they truly are in sort of a remarkable way. They can't even help themselves. And as you're describing Nancy Pelosi, this cool, calm, collected, dispassionate, field general. And but then she throws a temper tantrum, and then she doubles down on explaining the temper tantrum in a way that portrays her as venal and petty and about her, where you just had the president give a speech about you and this country and its future. And that's not a pretty good that's not a very good contrast for the Democrats.
Yeah, and just when people try to think they were reacting to Trump in a Trumpian way, and that will really teach them and that will really bring them down, it never works. We saw this in the primary. It didn't work with Marco Rubio. It doesn't work standing up there and ripping up his speech. So it wasn't a great night for her, and not a great night. I acknowledge Trump should have shook her hand. Trump shouldn't mention Obama, but like chanting from the floor. That 10 years ago, the whole country was convulsed in outrage, at least the media, that one Republican congressman shouted, "You lie." Now, I guess floor demonstrations are going to become the norm.
And their floor demonstration with HR3, is that what the ladies in white were chanting?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then it's just
you have to look in my program for what HR3 is, but okay, yeah.
Yeah, my favorite moment was when we focused on the ladies in white when Trump said we're going to plant 1 trillion more trees.
I know.
And you could see, can we just show a little pleasure at this or not? And a couple of them, clapped really half-heartedly. I thought Senator Sinema was also fascinating all night because she's a relative moderate, so she actually kind of clapped at stuff, but she was like the only one.
Yeah, no, there was times when she stood up and she was the only one standing up. So I think she's going to vote to acquit today.
But you could tell every single decision whether to clap or to stand was she had to think about it because everyone it was a fraught political choice each time.
Well, it seems like you may have cults running into cults here. You have the would-be suffragettes and the Bernie Sanders backbenchers, and then you have sort of everybody else that is scared to death of the prospect of a nominee named Bernie. And despite the fact that the Iowa caucus fiasco blunts the importance of that caucus and its results, Bernie still is perhaps even more so the front runner going into New Hampshire than he was prior to Iowa.
I don't know. I think it's a little tricky because maybe I'm a captive of my own expectations, but I thought Bernie could win this handily in Iowa. I thought he could win sort of going away 5-7 points. And it's not clear he really turned out anyone beyond people who are already Bernie voters. But look, he's going to looks like he's going to win both the popular vote measures. Who knows? He might inch ahead of Pete on the delegates as well. And he's been strong in New Hampshire throughout. So he's clearly the front runner in New Hampshire. I thought he could take on a little bit of the aspect of a runaway train. So I think that scenario is a little less likely. But I mean, the big story is Biden, and right. You guys are talking about it. He could still finish 5th, right? When he flamed out in 2008, he finished 5th in Iowa, and this he's supposedly the front runner here, and he still could finish 5th or just barely above 5th in Iowa. So he has a puncher's chance, in Nevada and South Carolina to revive. I doubt he's doing it in New Hampshire. But if he doesn't, he could be out of this race by the end of the month.
But which is stunning. But in one respect, and not stunning in another. I mean, you've watched this. We've all watched this guy for months and months now, and he just doesn't have the chops for this gig at this time, if he ever did. And I would argue he never did. I just watched the Clarence Thomas documentary, Created Equal, and going back 30 years to that Senate Judiciary Committee hearing that he chaired, that confirmation hearing. And the interchanges between him and Thomas. I mean, he didn't have the chops 30 years ago. It hasn't gotten better in the intervening 3 decades. But with respect to Bernie, the only thing I would push back on is to say this. Over the last 3 weeks, as Bernie was gathering steam, you had Obama world and Clinton world flax come out. You've got people, moving the whole thing to DEFCON 5. And, and that probably has some impact, particularly as people peel off of Joe Biden and decide where they want to go. Maybe Bernie is too dangerous. Maybe James Carville and David Axelrod and Rahm are right and so on and so forth, but I can't stomach Biden. But, they can only hold that line for so long if Bernie keeps piling up victories and strong finishes in states where perhaps he's not expected to have a strong finish like South Carolina.
Yeah. No, I totally. I think if you're just given the percentage percentage odds of winning the nomination right now at this moment, you give Bernie the highest odds. Maybe not hugely, but the highest odds, because he very well could win New Hampshire. That still seems likely or not. And then he could win Nevada. And then, you have a near victory, at least, maybe actual victory in Iowa, and then subsequent 2 victories. And then, he's in a real strong place. I still think he's going to have a problem in South Carolina, have a problem in the South. But on Super Tuesday, in that scenario, he'd be the favorite in California. So you'd have to favor him to go into a convention, at least with more delegates than anyone else. And whoever does that, even if it's short of a majority and the magic number you need, it's going to be really hard to take it away from him or her.
And where does Michael Bloomberg fit into all of this?
I don't know. I've been skeptical all along. I mean, skipping the first 4 seems just so crazy. But this was also a good outcome for him, because the best scenario is Biden crashing and burning and a muddled result. So it still seems unlikely to me that that the party that doesn't particularly like Michael Bloomberg rushes into his arms in a fit of desperation. I mean, why not just prop up Pete at that point? Why would you need to go to Bloomberg? But he has a heck of a lot of money. He's bought some poll numbers. And as I said, this fiasco is certainly helpful to his scenario, even if it's still unlikely.
But don't you think that if it came down to 2 and Biden wasn't one of the 2, if it was Bernie, don't you think he'd want Bloomberg to be the other guy, $2 billion or not, that he's willing to spend? I mean, he fits right into Bernie's wheelhouse and where at least the plurality, if not the majority of the party is.
Yeah, it could be, his Jeb Bush, what Bush was to Trump, except for Bloomberg, I think would be more potent than Jeb would be, because if this scenario, Buttigieg fails to take off despite this amazing outcome. I mean, this guy, he's a former mayor now of a small city, and somehow managed to win or almost win the Iowa caucus. That is an extraordinary thing. But if he can't capitalize on this because he's too demographically limited, and Biden's going nowhere, and Klobuchar's going nowhere, there is half the party is relatively moderate, and maybe they have to, even if they're not that into Bloomberg, they would go with him. So he would be, a challenger for Bernie. But it's not just that Bloomberg's a billionaire. The way he's run this campaign, I think, is sort of disgraceful. And I'm not one to have fainting fits over money in politics, and I tend to think people can't buy elections when it comes to the end of the day. But he's only in this as a sheer force of financial might. If he just had to be Michael Bloomberg, like going into the debates with the same amount of resources as everyone else, he'd be, 15% maybe or something. But we wouldn't be talking about him as a potential threat to win the nomination.
Absolutely. The other thing that's really interesting about him, and boy, it just sets up for Bernie. Joel Kotkin has a good piece on Bloomberg, the authoritarian. He is what the Democrats fear Trump to be. Trump isn't going to abide the election results. He's going to try and change the Constitution and get a third term. That's actually what Bloomberg did as mayor of New York City.
No, that's an excellent point. And the whole thing that's been really irritating about impeachment is, I think, is improper. Trump shouldn't have done it. But the idea that Democrats are saying we got to do this to right-size executive power again and stop unilateral rule. At the same time, none of them are batting an eyelash at Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders promising to implement huge parts of their agenda unilaterally, and certainly in the case of Elizabeth Warren, illegally with no constitutional warrant, is just astonishing hypocrisy even for them.
He is Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, Fox News contributor, author of The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. Rich, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Backed by popular demand, the 2020 Tinley Park Golf Show, the February 7th through the 9th at the Tinley Park Convention Center. Show hours are Friday noon to 8, Saturday 10 to 5, and Sunday 11 to 4. Enjoy a true golfing experience with driving range demo area and reps from Callaway, Wilson, Tour Edge, Cobra, TaylorMade, and Mizuno. Compete in the skills challenges for the longest drive, closest to the pin, and the long putt. Daily winners and top 10 in long drive and closest to the pin compete Sunday afternoon at 2 for a $500 cash prize. Browse aisles of newly released equipment and apparel from Chicagoland's top retailers at the Tinley Park Golf Show. Plus, check out the live telecast of the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am at the famous Parmesan's 19th Hole Bar and Lounge. For tickets and hotel information, go to Tinley Park Convention